Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It's the 9th of November, and as always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information. You can do that easily by calling 1-800-472-0391. That's the Alaska Weather Information Line. You can always find our information online at weather.gov/Alaska, and make sure that you check that frequently going through the weekend, because conditions in northern and western Alaska will be changing significantly, and staying up to date with the latest watches, warnings, and advisories for your community and village will be very important. If you can't find what you're looking for, please do let me know. david.snider@noaa.gov is the easiest way to find me for all of your weather information there online, or when you can't find it online. Happy to help when I can. Here's a look at what's going on across the region. We're going to start with southeast because while the snow will be pretty, hopefully the wind will not be very strong. This situation seems a little bit less critical than what we have going up into the northwest. So we're going to give that a little more attention here in a moment, but stand by for northwest. In southeast, a winter storm warning now will go into effect for areas around Juneau, up toward Skagway, and then north and west all the way up toward Yakutat. You're looking at winter weather advisories. In the warning areas, you should expect about 6 inches of snow around the Juneau community and general vicinity there, all the way out toward Elfin Cove, and then northward, again, lesser amounts of snow, but to Yakutat, under a winter weather advisory, still looking at significant amounts of snow for what we would consider for the rest of us. For Yakutat, probably no big deal, right? So that is what we're expecting as we go into tonight and into tomorrow. Snow is beginning as we head through the evening and overnight hours, and should pick up as we go into the morning for the Juneau region. Now, a look up north. This is a complicated situation, but two big factors are part of the puzzle here. It is the onshore push of wind and the lack of sea ice around the Kotzebue Sound region and the Norton Sound area. On top of that, we also have significant amounts of snow. In general, places from Ambler out toward Coldfoot have seen about a foot of snow already, and it's still snowing in those places. You should expect more snow. It's not going to stop as we head into the next day or so. A winter storm warning is still in effect for areas that you see shaded in red. But we need to concentrate on the coastal areas, because that's where the bigger issue is going to be. You've already seen some pushes of water in the last several waves of storms, and we have another one coming as we head into Friday night and Saturday. And the big push should be Saturday night and into Sunday. We've already heard that some of the water in the lagoon around Shishmaref was coming up a little bit, and trends like that will likely be seen. So coastal flood warnings may be possible for your community. Right now we're talking about high surf advisories for many areas, as well as coastal flood watches down the northwest coast and across the western tip of the Seward Peninsula, Kotzebue Sound, and into eastern Norton Sound. Let's check on the particulars, though. This is from our friends at the Fairbanks Weather Forecast Office, and they shared this with you on Facebook this afternoon. Hopefully you've had a chance to see it. If not, this will be your first opportunity. We're looking at Kotzebue Sound here, and coastal flooding does look to be possible through the weekend and into Monday, mainly along the Chukchi Coast and the Kotzebue Sound area. In Kotzebue Sound here, for the area shaded in red, we think the highest sea levels and winds are going to be Sunday afternoon and into evening. The surge could be about 4 to 6 feet, and northwesterly winds 20 to 30 miles per hour with gusts as high as 40 miles an hour are possible in that area. For the northern Seward Peninsula here, the highest sea levels and winds will probably be Sunday afternoon into the evening. The surge could be about 4 to 5 feet with northwesterly winds coming in about 25 to 40 miles an hour, and gusts could be as high as 50 miles per hour for this area. So again, significant beach erosion may be possible with a setup like this, and again, the surge should be about 4 to 5 feet. As we understand it, that may put water on top of the runway, but it should not damage a whole lot of the buildings there in Shishmaref. So hopefully that remains the case, but make sure you check in on the latest conditions. The Chukchi Sea coastline, the highest sea levels and winds will probably be Sunday afternoon and evening. Surge around 4 to 5 feet with the northwesterly winds about 20 to 30, gusting as high as 40 miles an hour near the coast. So 4 to 5 feet on the outer parts of Kotzebue Sound. On the inside, you're talking a little bit more closer to 4 to 6 feet. So Deering and Kotzebue themselves would be some of the places that would have slightly higher surges in that. You can see this on Facebook anytime, and make sure you stay up to date with your latest weather information from your own community leaders there and from the National Weather Service, especially in Fairbanks. You can find this online on Facebook as well. Now let's take a look at the overall satellite picture. A pretty broad flow coming in from the south, moving across Bristol Bay and into the interior. This is creating a mess of snow across the south-facing slopes of the Brooks Range, and many of you are probably saying, yes, it's about time. It looks like 6 to 12 inches of snow has already fallen in many places from Ambler out toward Coldfoot, as I mentioned, and we're going to get more snow. This may taper off a little bit as this significant zone of low pressure moves eastward, but the overall flow really doesn't seem to change that much. Ebbs and flows a little bit, but snow will still be possible, especially ahead of this weather maker as it's moving eastward. The other side of this is it has been snowing across parts in south central or along the Matanuska and Susitna valleys down into the Anchorage area. And this piece is also moving eastward toward the Juneau region as well as northern parts of southeast into the northern Gulf and Yakutat. So it is going to be a pretty significant snow machine for many parts of Alaska, and central and eastern interior locations are going to get more as well. As we head toward the weekend, the flow should produce about 3 to 5, maybe 3 to 6 inches of snow across the central and eastern interior, even though you're not going to be likely under a winter weather advisory or a warning or something that sounds really significant or causes any larger concern. It will probably slow down road travel, so make sure that you're prepared for a different winter experience here across the interior and for parts of south central as we go through the weekend. As we look out west, you can see the next part of the weekend weather maker moving in from the western Bering Sea. This is working north and east and will intensify across eastern Russia before moving into parts of the Chukchi Sea out around the Wrangel Island area, where this low will deepen and help to develop those north and westerly winds we're seeing there around Kotzebue Sound. In the meantime, for southeast, you're still dealing with some breezy conditions. Low pressure is moving through the Pacific Northwest now and still drawing in a lot of air across the panhandle. So drier weather, at least temporarily for you, before that next round of snow starts to move in later on tonight and into tomorrow. Here is the weather map right now. Low pressure sitting across the central interior. This is creating the snow across the region, and as I mentioned, 6 to 12 inches in many places there across the southern slopes of the Brooks Range. Another shot of cold air coming in across the Chukchi coast and reinforcing that stiff northwesterly wind. We have high pressure across the central chain and high pressure across western Canada, a trough of low pressure right now helping to create the breeze across southeastern Alaska. As the low moves eastward tonight, you're going to get the snow in Juneau all the way up toward Yakutat. On the outer coast, a better chance that you're going to see rain. Don't be surprised if you see some snowflakes mixed in, but generally speaking, it'll be rain south of Sitka into the southern interchannels, and north of that, especially Juneau into Haines, Skagway, Gustavus, Hoonah, all the way up toward Yakutat. You're looking at snow. Looks like most of the south-facing slopes of the Brooks Range will continue to see snow and blowing snow for the Chukchi Coast. Visibility will start to drop off pretty quickly, especially as those winds come up one more time. High pressure sitting across the central chain at 1,039 millibars, pushing in a slug of warm and wet air toward the western coast. That moves even further eastward as we head into Friday. Low pressure still sitting off the coast of southeast around Cross Sound and just south of Yakutat at 1,002 millibars. There will be periods of rain mixing with snow in the inside passages tomorrow, but again, generally north from Sitka to about Juneau. Everything there is going to be a decent amount of snow, probably at least 3 to 6 inches where you are. Now, across the interior, watch for a wave of snow to pass through the area as more significant snow across the south and western slopes there of the western Brooks Range. And as you get into the Bering Strait communities, you're looking at snow into Norton Sound, all the way into the YK Delta, with a little bit of mixing as you head back toward Nunivak Island and Macoriac, and high pressure is still anchored in place across the eastern chain, 1,039 millibars, with low pressure not even to the eastern coast of Russia just yet. But here's a look at Saturday, and as this moves out toward Wrangel Island and intensifies to about 992 millibars, that warmer air moves in. This should start to make a pretty effective snow machine again for the Kobuk and Noatak valleys out toward Ambler, and then even points eastward. South of that into the upper Kuskokwim, we're expecting snow. Rain and snow for the YK Delta around Nome and Seward and Shishmaref. Snow and blowing snow may be possible in those areas all the way up the Chukchi Coast. and west of the Dalton Highway. So a lot of things are going to change as we head back into Saturday. And that's just the snow. When you start talking about the wind again, you're talking about those gusts of 40 to 50 miles per hour and sustained winds of 20, 30, maybe even 40 miles per hour at times into the Kotzebue Sound region and into the Chukchi Seacoast. So there will be a significant push of water here, and it's very likely there will be some coastal erosion with that and probably some coastal flooding. So again, time to prepare and make sure that you're paying attention to the weather as it's changing. Low pressure south and west of Haida Gwaii at 1,002 millibars will slowly pull the moisture out of the southeastern panhandle, and you'll get back into a breezy situation for the meantime, and then another weather maker starts to slide your way to wrap up the weekend. Out west you can see rain and another surge of moisture working its way up the western side of the high pressure system. Strong as it is, it's also a moisture pump, so that weather is just returning back into the western bearing as we move into the mid-weekend. Let's take a look at temperatures quickly, and across the central and eastern interior, we're looking at lows in the single digits and teens, 13 in Fairbanks tonight, 4 below in Arctic Village, teens and 20s for the North Slope. In southwest, we're looking at lows back in the 20s around Bristol Bay, 28 degrees or so for Dillingham, King Salmon, 22 in Nome, and 20s and low 30s for southeast. South central back in the mid to lower 20s, and 32 around Kodiak. Highs tomorrow, mainly in the teens for places around the central interior, Eagle and Northway included. South central in the 20s and low 30s, 40 for Kodiak. St. Paul, you're looking at 42, St. Lawrence Island about 38, 26 in Barrow. Kotzebue back in the mid-20s as we get into Saturday morning. Colder and drier for the interior, temperatures going sub-zero for places like Fort Yukon. The North Slope, you're looking at teens, mainly for the Beaufort Seacoast, near 20 across the Chukchi Seacoast, 20s for coastal areas in Kotzebue Sound and Norton Sound, and low 30s as you get out toward the southwestern coast. Macquarie 39 for a low on Saturday, and 30s for southeast, with highs back in the upper 30s for southeast and teens for the central and eastern interior, and mid-20s for most of the North Slope on Saturday.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
On to flying weather now. IFR conditions will spread from the central and western chain all the way up toward St. Matthew in the morning across the upper Kobuk and Noatak valleys and the Chukchi coast. Look for IFR there, and into the north-facing slopes of the Brooks Range as we get into the morning hours. Hit and miss IFR patches across the Alaska Range and into the upper Tanana Valley and into the Copper River Basin and Wrangell-St. Elias region. MVFR also spreading into the inner channels of southeast and up against some of the higher terrain of the Misty Fjords. As you get into the afternoon on Friday, watch for widespread IFR to move into the Yukon and Kuskokwim deltas and upriver a little bit. You'll notice IFR developing across the north-facing slopes of the Alaska Range, the upper Yukon and Yukon Flats, and also along the Brooks Range, as well as the Beaufort Seacoast. IFR also takes over a large part of southeast as we get into Friday afternoon. By Saturday, the focus will be across the Yukon and Kuskokwim Delta, Norton Sound, Seward Peninsula, Kotzebue Sound, and the Kobuk and Noatak valleys there in the south-facing slopes of the western Brooks Range. MVFR hit and miss across the interior with some smaller concentrations of IFR there. But again, the main focus will be the push of wind and winter weather coming ashore there as we get into Saturday morning. You can see that spreading in even further into the Koyukuk and the south-facing slopes, generally west of the Dalton Highway, the Chukchi coast, all the way down to the upper Kuskokwim and Bristol Bay region and the Pacific coast of the Alaska Peninsula. Looking at southeast, MVFR conditions will trim back a little bit more for the central and southern parts of southeast. IFR not expected by this point on Saturday afternoon, and you can see IFR also building back in across the western Aleutian chain. Let's look at your flying weather through the next 2 days. Let's take a look at your pass maps in detail. Anaktuvuk and Adigan Pass are expected to hold at IFR. You might see a little bit of improvement, at least in the morning, before it goes back to IFR for Adigan Pass on your Friday. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, we expect to see IFR conditions to start the day, but some improvements will be seen by the end of the afternoon. As far as Rainy Pass goes, looks like it'll hold around IFR, especially on the northern side. So plan on some tricks going through there. Windy Pass, MVFR conditions to start as we go, and then perhaps leaning over toward IFR by the afternoon. The same goes for Isabel Pass, expecting IFR to develop at least by the afternoon. Mentasta Pass is going to push over to MVFR. You've had a couple good days there with VFR conditions. Looks like conditions should start to lean toward MVFR. And as we get to Tanita Pass, more of the same. MVFR conditions expected probably through most of the day. It looks like IFR will be a little bit further north. And Portage Pass, VFR conditions there for now, and Chilkoot and White Pass will start there, but IFR conditions may develop as we get into the afternoon, and then certainly on Saturday, as you saw there with the previous chart. Freezing levels show the cold air is certainly entrenched. We've got a lot of warm air building out across the west, though. This is all sliding eastward with the next wave of weather coming ashore. For southeast, the 2,000-foot freezing line just south of Sitka and the Dixon entrance at this point. So most of the state is sub-freezing. As you look at icing potential, we do have some moisture moving in. A lot of this will be a higher level threat, but up north, levels between 2,000 and 4,000 foot. An isolated moderate right now is where we are thinking. For south and east, above 7,000 feet for most of the panhandle. You can see that's fairly broad coverage there for your icing threat on Friday. Jet stream potential right now has a trough across the eastern Bering Sea, a ridge building across the west, and another trough building right behind it. This very active pattern coming in from the west to the east is keeping the storm systems moving toward us. Low pressure across the Pacific Northwest is dropping further south at this time. At 9,000 feet, low pressure across the northern Gulf is slinging in a west and southwesterly flow into southeast. Stronger winds behind that, 50 to 65 knots across southwest and south central Alaska, and a broad westerly flow sweeping across the Brooks Range at 20 to 40 knots. High pressure is sitting across the central Aleutians, and again a strengthening southerly flow there. 40 to 60 knots expected across the western Bering, and across the west coast you're looking at winds from 50 to as high as 70 knots all the way through the Bering Strait. At 3,000 feet the pattern's really identical. The wind speeds are a little different though. We're still looking at 15 to 20, maybe as high as 45 knots across the interior and southwestern Alaska. Low pressure still sitting across the northern Gulf, and for southeast, light winds from the south and southeast, at times a little more southwesterly flows you get out ashore. Westerlies across the north slope, and then strengthening southerlies again across the western chain. Turbulence for the next several days will be focused across the west coast, especially as we get into the weekend. Below 4,000 feet is where we expect to see considerable moderate across the west facing slopes of the Brooks Range through the Seward Peninsula, Norton Sound, the Koyukuk and the upper Kuskokwim and lower Yukon valleys, Bristol Bay, Kodiak Island, south central, but not over southeast and not over a large part of the southern Bering. We'll be back with a look at your Marines here in just a few minutes.
The Leonid Meteor Shower. Hey there, stargazers. I'm James Albury, director of the Kika Silva Pla Planetarium in Gainesville, Florida.
And I'm Dehne Regas, astronomer for the Cincinnati Observatory. We're here to help you find your way around the sky.
On the mornings of November 17th and 18th, from midnight to dawn, you may get to see the annual Leonid Meteor Shower.
And this year, the moon is going to help by staying out of the way. Let's show you. If you're far from city lights on any clear moonless night, you're likely to see a few meteors if you stay out long enough and keep looking up. Oh, wait. There's more. The show's not over yet.
Meteors have long been called shooting stars because that's what they look like, but they're not really stars shooting across the sky. In fact, when you see a meteor, you're seeing a tiny speck of space debris, anywhere from the size of a grain of sand to pebble-sized. They slam into our Earth's atmosphere at such high speeds that friction with the gases in our Earth's atmosphere cause the air to glow.
So when you see a shooting star, you're actually seeing the gas atoms of our Earth's atmosphere glow all along the path that the meteor has traveled. So on any clear, dark, moonless night, you can see a handful of meteors if you have a lot of patience.
But about 12 times a year, we experience what we call a meteor shower. And every November, we have the Leonid meteor shower, so named because its meteors appear to radiate from the constellation Leo the Lion. Meteor showers are a bit different from the meteors you see every night because the meteors in a meteor shower are predictable and are made up of comet debris.
You see, every time a comet passes through our solar system, it sheds some of its debris along its orbit. And if the Earth intersects with the comet's path, well, we'll get a meteor shower. Meteor showers are somewhat predictable because the Earth returns to about the same spot in space at the same time each year.
And every November, we plow into some of the debris trails of Comet Tempel-Tuttle, a comet which visits the Sun every 33 years. And in the years just preceding or following Tempel-Tuttle's passage, we pass through denser debris trails, and we may experience meteor showers with greater than usual intensity, which we call meteor storms. The last storm from the Leonids was in 2002.
You never know when one of these storms may happen, but the best prediction to see some meteors this year for North America is to go out from 1 a.m. through dawn on the 17th or 18th.
I know that's really late at night, and it might be cold outside, but that's the best time to look.
Face east, where you'll find Leo rising. He has a backward question mark for a head and a triangle for a tail. The meteors will seem to radiate from around there.
As the night goes on, Leo will get higher in the sky, and you'll have a better chance of seeing more meteors.
Maybe you'll see a few really bright meteors with long trails.
Or maybe not. And one more thing, the Leonids are the fastest of all meteors because we are hitting them nearly head-on. They slam into our Earth's atmosphere traveling at speeds of over 158,000 miles per hour. Whew, watch out.
And for those of you who can only stay up until 10 p.m., you can get a preview of the winter sky. Look southeast for Orion and his snazzy belt of 3 stars rising up.
The belt stars can point you to other star patterns. Connect the dots and keep going up. You'll run into Taurus the Bull. That looks like a V-shaped pattern of stars. And if you keep going a little further, you'll come to the best star cluster in the sky, the Seven Sisters.
Back to the early morning sky on the 17th or 18th. Be sure to get out and watch the Leonid meteor shower radiating from Leo the Lion.
And just as dawn breaks, the giant planet Jupiter will rise and join the show. So happy meteor shower and
Keep looking up.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
On to the latest sea ice analysis now. As of today, the Beaufort Seacoast is still filling in. We've got some marginal ice left in between the areas between the coast and the main pack ice. And you can see there's still some marginal ice along the Chukchi Coast and the upper end of the Kotzebue Sound area and along the YK Delta, even in the upper end of Norton Sound. However, with strong northwesterly winds, the ice is not ready to protect the coastline yet, and that's one reason we have such a concern for the Kotzebue Sound area as we go into Saturday and Sunday. Now, eventually, once the storm passes, we should see some pretty rapid growth up across the northern Chukchi Sea, but down south, sea surface temperatures still remain on the warm side. Let's take a look at southeast now. For Friday, we're looking at north and northeasterly winds across the northern half of the inside passages, 15 to 20 knots, 3 to 4 foot seas in all areas there, and a south and westerly flow ashore. That's 15 to 20 knots with 7 to 8 foot seas there, 8 to 9 foot seas across the northern Gulf. But all of this is surrounding an area of low pressure, which will create rain and snow, and once again, the first significant snow of the Juneau area for the season there, maybe up to 6 inches in your region. For Saturday, northerlies coming down through the Stevens Passage and Lynn Canal region, 30 knots with 6 to 7 foot seas. Easterlies coming across Clarence Strait, 20 knots with 4 foot seas, and an offshore flow developing across the outer coast, anywhere from 15 to 30 knots. Look for seas to come up to around 8 to 9 feet in most areas, with the higher seas south of Sitka and that 15 to 20 knot wind. For South Central and inside Prince William Sound, 25 knots with a northerly flow, 5 foot seas there, 8 to 14 foot seas across the western Gulf. With stronger winds coming across the Barrens, we expect seas to come up there to 13 to 14 feet and 4 to 5 foot seas across Cook Inlet with northerly winds at 20 knots. For Saturday, not a lot of change there. Northwesterlies, though, will settle down just a little bit more across the Barrens. Still looking at higher seas east of the Barrens at 11 feet and 6 to 7 foot seas across the northern Gulf. Inside of Prince William Sound, still looking at northerlies at 20 knots with 4 foot seas on Saturday. For Kodiak Island, look for a northwesterly flow, 35 to 40 knots, 14 foot seas on the eastern side, 8 foot seas inside of Shelikof Strait. We're looking for similar conditions inside of Bristol Bay on a northwesterly wind at 25 knots and 9 foot seas down the coast. Northwesterlies on the Pacific coast bring 8 to 12 foot seas there for Friday. For Saturday, not a lot of change. We're still looking at northwesterly flows across Kodiak Island and across the Pacific coast. A little bit more of a westerly push, though, coming in as high pressure is moving from west to east across the Aleutians and toward the Alaska Peninsula on Saturday. For the chain, high pressure is right about here between Nikolsky and Unalaska for your Friday. That means a south and easterly flow for the central and western chain. 15 to 30 knots, the high seas out west between Kiska and Attu. And a little bit more of a west and northwesterly push between Unalaska and Nikolsky. There is, once again, high pressure is right about here. So we're getting into that west and northwesterly flow the further east we go. As that moves eastward, we're going to get into a little bit more of the return flow on Saturday for just about all of the chain. South and easterly winds there, 20 to 25 knots, 6 to 13-foot seas, especially between Adak and Kiska. And look for a southwesterly flow from Unalaska to Nikolsky, 15 knots with 6-foot seas there. On Friday, for the west coast, you're looking at an onshore flow, 25 knots, 7 to 8-foot seas from north and south of Macquarie, 5-foot seas coming into Norton Sound, 20-knot winds there from the west. St. Paul and St. George looking at 20 knots with a 7-foot sea for Saturday. You can see the winds and seas coming up there with that next push from the south and west, 30 to 35 knots, 5 to 11-foot seas across the northern Bering, and north and westerly winds from the Kuskokwim Delta to the Pribilofs, 7-foot seas around the Pribilofs. St. Matthew seeing seas up to 15 feet. Now for the north and west coast. This is where we're really watching carefully. Westerlies on Friday, 9 to 12-foot seas offshore, and closer to the coastline, 8 to 11-foot seas there into Kotzebue Sound, and westerlies through the Beaufort Seacoast, 6 to 9-foot seas expected across the Beaufort. And as we get into Saturday, we're expecting southerlies to move through the region. But remember, this is going to become northwesterly with time. 7 to 9-foot seas are expected there as that weather maker comes in and starts to push more water into the upper end of Kotzebue Sound. Storm surge again could be around 4 to 5 feet, so continue to monitor your local conditions. Once again, the weather map for you. Low pressure across the northern Gulf will bring snow to the northern half of southeast with winter storm warnings and winter weather advisories posted for the first significant snow of the season in southeast. As the storm moves through on Friday, expect snow to continue and expect another push of snow and wind to arrive across the west and northwestern coastlines of Alaska. Snow will focus on the south-facing slopes of the Brooks Range with another 6 to 12 inches of snow possible in some areas there, and also setting up for a northwesterly push into the Kotzebue Sound area where coastal flooding is possible as well as beach erosion. So continue to monitor conditions there. The very latest information for you online anytime at weather.gov/Alaska. Thanks for watching Alaska Weather.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.